afternoon, everyone. It's a beautiful warm day, and I'm glad you are able to join us. So shall we start with the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, republic which stands under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And then I will ask you to put your speakers on mute. And if you have questions, to put them on chat, and Marie and I will coordinate responding to those. And that will help us not have so much interference. Do we have any guests today? I didn't see any. Oh, how could I forget? The first gentleman is here. My husband, Roger, from the Topeka South Club, is joining us today. Are there any other guests?
My husband, Don, is joining us.
Oh, great. Welcome, Don.
Hello.
Good to see you all. Okay. Did have a few announcements before we proceed to the announcement. First of all, that our June Cup money is going to sheltered living, and you will learn more about it and what it does at our meeting next week. And then if you would go to my email, you'll see how you can hook up to sign up to donate blood. We're having blood donation, sponsoring blood donation. There, with the COVID-19, there's a lot of shortage for blood, and so this is a way that we can support that, and that is on June 12th. You do have to make a reservation to facilitate working with all the sanitation issues. And lastly, I just learned this morning that our pastor, Dr. Bob Jacoby, passed away early this morning after a bad bicycle accident last night. So he was a very active member of our club until he retired. So I may get very emotional about this, so I will ask you all to kind of bear with me. But, you know, for almost 4 years, maybe a little over 4 years, our club has been hopping around the city trying to find a place to meet. It's been quite a struggle. I know it's been a frustration for many of you who would call me on Thursday mornings, where are we meeting this week? And then hoping that there was a parking place there, that it was accessible. And we even had times when our meeting place was moved from one room to another that we didn't know about till we actually arrived there. You all have been very patient and very supportive as we hunted for a place to meet permanently. We needed to find a place that the parking was readily available, the rent was reasonable, and that would work with us regarding our needs for meals and space. I'm thrilled to be able to share with you today that we have found a permanent meeting place. When we begin to meet face-to-face, and hopefully that will be in July 9th for Stan's first meeting, we will be meeting at our permanent meeting place. The East venue at the K. McFarland Japanese Garden at the Topeka Zoo. You all have mutes on. I can't hear you, Sharon.
Yay!
Yay! Thanks to
Glad to hear that.
Yay! Yay!
Thanks to Marie and Vince Fry, we have some pictures to show you of work in progress for our new meeting place. So Marie, if you would share those. Thank you. I don't know if any of you have been over to Gage Park to see the progress that has been making in that construction. If you have not, I would encourage you to do that. Those pictures begin to convey just the beauty and the calm and the peace that the Japanese garden is going to be. So with that, I would toast to all of you to a permanent, beautiful event center for Rotary of the Topeka Club, the Rotary Club of Topeka. I'll get it there. Thank you.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. The Rotary Club of Topeka, which I encourage you to refer to us since we will no longer be meeting downtown, has a long history with the Topeka Zoo. And we've asked Brendan today to not only share with you the progress and what the zoo will be doing, but also to share with us the history that our club has had with the Topeka Zoo. So with that, I will ask Brendan to take over.
Thanks, Joni. And I can't tell you how great it is to see everyone here. I am trying to, there we go. I wondered, well, hopefully you're seeing the right screen. Anyway, yes, thanks for allowing me to be with the group today. This is incredible news for us. I do want to share some of those stories, and I want to start kind of who we are today, and then let's jump back, talk about some of those relationships that the zoo has had with Rotary, and then talk about what the future looks like with the Rotary Club of Topeka meeting at the Topeka Zoo. So, oh, you're not seeing the right screen. Huh. I wonder how I switch that. We'll try it this way. Oh, well, I'm just going to go with it. So there's this word zoo. And if you're a person that's confused as to why would Rotary meet at the zoo, let me share a little information about that three-letter word. First of all, piece of trivia for today, the least misspelled word in the English language is, of course, the word zoo, right? So this word zoo has actually been around for about 5,000 years. And over that much time, that type of word begins to mean many different things to many different people, and some of those things aren't always good associations. For the last several years, I've been on a soapbox saying, you know what, we really need to call ourselves something different. We really need to talk about a name that says what we do. And I got as far as changing the name to Topeka Zoo and Conservation Center, because that story of conservation is really what we're about. Then, during the pandemic, this little program came on Netflix called The Tiger King, and I was able to go, see, that's what I'm talking about. We are not at all a zoo like that. Our zoo today is very much focused on creating this notion of change in people. That as people, we have the opportunity to change our environment, to change the world, to make the world a better place. In terms of who comes to the zoo, now keep in mind the population of Topeka or Shawnee County is around 175,000 people. Last year, we saw an annual attendance of over 224,000 people. It's about a 50-50 split between children and adults, and we've got 5,600 local, mostly local, household members. So we're well used by our metropolitan area, if you will. But that usage and growth actually extends about an hour radius around Topeka. these two charts go up to 2018. I can tell you that 2019 numbers for number of people that participated in one of our fee-based education programs was 29,970. And if you're asking yourself, how is that possible? It's possible because schools from Emporia to Western Johnson County come here for their environmental education. When you get right down to it, we're just a much friendlier zoo to get in and out of than the either the Sedgwick County Zoo in Wichita or the Kansas City Zoo to the east of us. If you've ever heard me talk about the zoo, you know that one of the programs that I love best is what we do with teenagers. Teenagers have this reputation of just being really hard to work with, but we put them in programming and experiences that keeps them busy, keeps them engaged. And what we see is these teenagers continue to be interested in the environment. They pursue college coursework and even careers that benefits our natural living world. And it's just a program that we have that I'm incredibly proud of. This year, and seeing some of the people participating in this call, those individuals, along with the Women's Fund, have developed a grant program where we are offering scholarships to disadvantaged youth through Williams Magnet, that they can begin to participate completely free as fifth graders in our camp programs, so that we can get them engaged early, include them in our teen programming later, so that they too grow up to be engaged with the natural world. So the zoo that we are today, in terms of how we exhibit animals, how we display experiences, the Camp Cowabunga project is a good example of that. Built to really engage people when they get there in unique and representative experience, but also in areas that provide world-class animal care. So that's the zoo that we are today. But things were different 10 years ago. And I saw two very familiar faces that were on this call. One being Jim Ogle, one being Vince Fry. And I know that Jim Ogle is especially going to remember a time period 10, 11 years ago that this community wasn't sure which direction it was going to go with its zoo. There was a question as to whether or not a zoo still belonged here. And Vince, I remember probably almost 10 years to the day, sitting at a city council meeting where you stood and you gave testimony about the benefits of a downtown redevelopment. And so 10 years ago, our community began to visualize what a new downtown could look like. And 10 years ago, we applied purpose to our zoo. So yes, today we're working on the K. McFarland Japanese Garden, a concept that started with a conversation about a koi pond with a bridge over it. Originally, we were calling it K's Garden. And then it was 4 or 5 months ago when we really started to understand the scope of what was being built here. We decided to change the name because this garden is going to become a destination. And we wanted the name to help people understand what it is. So we went from K's Garden to the K. McFarland Japanese Garden. I just want to show you a couple images, and some are the same images that Marie put on the screen earlier, and give just a little bit of explanation. The garden itself is actually about 75 to 80% done. There is a building that interacts with the garden. It's closer to being about 90 to 95% done. this is one of the first structures that you encounter when you come into the garden. And by definition, it's an outlook. The literal translation of the name is it's a waiting room. And so this would be one of those first garden experiences where you go and you reflect and you get yourself spiritually prepared to experience an authentic Japanese garden. The garden also contains what many Americans refer to as a zigzag bridge. This is not a bridge that you zig and zag on to confuse the demons that are chasing you. This is actually an 8-plank bridge that reminds us of a pursuit of love and the different directions and paths that that can take one on. This area in the garden is going to be absolutely spectacular. And it really sits in the center of the garden space. And you can, okay, so this is strange. I'm not, Joni, if you can hear me, are you seeing pictures?
No, we're still seeing the word zoo.
Brandon,
Oh my goodness.
you need to undo the share screen and then share it again from where you need us to be.
Yeah.
I am so sorry. Okay, so I'm not sure.
I can stop your participation. Oh, there you go.
So share screen. Screen 1, screen 2.
Yay!
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Thanks, Shauna.
Yes. So this was the first image I was referring to. I've just been clicking through slides left and right. My downtown slides, the 2010 stuff. Anyway, so we'll go back to just kind of here. This is that outlook, that meditation point. One of the first places you'll arrive at in the Japanese garden. This is that 8-plank bridge that really tells just a beautiful story about love and how challenging it can be to find it or get back to it. This is that central area in the Japanese garden that that provides a background from so many different areas. And as this area develops, it's just truly going to be spectacular. That's a different view of that same area from what we're calling this tea house shade structure. There'll be a waterfall, of course, that flows under that bridge that you see in the background. There's 2 different streams that flow through this upper sacred garden that eventually connect right there. And at that point of connection, you can start to see into the lower garden area. And now I'm at the other end, kind of looking up. This is the koi pond. Not a small koi pond, but all of this rock work has been placed stone by stone. There are resemblances that have been designed into this when the water is at the appropriate level, where you'll be able to see the stone turtle, the stone crane, so many of those items that have true significance in the Japanese garden culture. But this is the space where the Rotary Club of Topeka will be able to call home. This is the event venue at the K. McFarland Japanese Garden. This space will seat 300 people at round tables. more comfortably about 250. And when I took this picture yesterday, they're actually polishing the concrete floor. Polished concrete floor will be its finish. And, it just doesn't do it justice. But all of the windows truly let in kind of the landscape and the feel. When you're in the building and look out, that koi pond will look like it flows right under the building. And this is attached to a small gallery space that really interprets what a Japanese garden is through comparing Kansas and Japanese landscapes. That same gallery space pays tribute to the first woman Kansas Supreme Court Chief Justice that was, of course, Kay McFarland. As an interesting side note, the second woman Kansas Supreme Court Chief Justice, her husband is a former board chair of Friends of the Topeka Zoo. So the connections that we experience here in Topeka are just unlike any I've ever known. So let's go back to that thought for just a moment. Why Rotary? Why Rotary at the zoo? Rotary does incredible work. And this clearly isn't the reason why Rotary belongs here, but it is part of the reason that I at least wanted to share. For me, this is a little bit personal. My father was born in 1935 and at age 7 contracted polio. And so the work that Polio International does to rid the world of that horrid disease is just phenomenal. And it speaks to me very personally. But then there's Rotary and the zoo. Who doesn't remember this picture of Max Falkenstein with his namesake, Max the gorilla? This is one of the first stories I learned about the Topeka Zoo was Max and the journey to go get the little gorilla. This is a copy of a book that was given to me that details that journey. Now, this one is actually a photocopy because the original that I had went to Max Falkenstein's memorial service at KU and remains with the Falkenstein family. What I didn't know until Max Falkenstein died, and I saw that Betty Morris was on this call. After Max, the person, passed away, I got an email from Betty's son that referenced the love affair book that Betty's husband put together. I had always made the assumption that this was the work of Gary Clark, and came to find out that it was not. And I share this story because Rotary is what made this possible. It was at a downtown Topeka Rotary meeting that Gary Clark stood up and said, we need to raise $5,000 to get Max the gorilla so that Tiffany could have a mate. And Max Falkenstein, Dr. Morse championed that cause, and lo and behold, Rotary accomplished it. A few years later, picture on the right is Gary at the White House with a piece of art that was entered into a children's art contest here in the state of Kansas. Only Gary didn't tell anyone when he entered the piece of art to that contest that it was a painting done by an orangutan and not a child. So the orangutan won the art contest. Rotary, again, came to the rescue, made it possible for that piece of art and that zoo director to be standing in the White House showing off Topeka's famous orangutan. Several years later, as we celebrated the 100th, the centennial birthday at the Civic Theater, Gary was presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award for his 27 years of service to the Rotary Club of Topeka. This zoo, its founding zoo director, have long been connected to the Rotary Club of Topeka. But there's another story and another reason why. And this story includes so many Rotarians. We have long since said that this is a community zoo. And when I first started working here, Gary told me, you'll never find another zoo that is more community-based than the one right here in Topeka, and how true that statement is. Since the 1960s, Rotarians, or maybe I should say people that are also Rotarians, have supported this zoo. Every community project that we have accomplished has had support from people that are also in Rotary. And what you come to learn about Rotarians is they're very much service-based. They come with giving attitudes, and not only do Rotarians do exceptional work through Rotary, but they do it in other aspects of the community as well. And it's every project we do. On my screen right now, I see Joni and Roger, the number of projects that you guys have participated in. If I look at the number of people that are on this call, our zoo supporters that are members of Rotarian, it just makes sense. So, when Stan called or emailed and said, hey, can we talk about this? We were very humbled. We were very grateful to be willing to offer our space for the home. And I'm having a hard time not saying downtown Topeka Rotary. So we're extremely excited to be able to welcome the Rotary Club of Topeka to call one of our facilities its home. That first meeting, July 9th, the K. McFarland Japanese Garden will not be open to the public yet. It's actually on track right now to open August 7th. That's a Friday. We are still planning to welcome to the grand opening of the garden the Consulate General from the Japanese Embassy in Chicago. That's kind of what I was alluding to about the quality of this garden. It has truly been built to be a world-class Japanese garden. But in those meetings leading up to the grand opening of it, Rotary's going to get that sneak peek. There will be work going on outside the windows during the days that you're here. And once it is complete, we hope that Rotarians will take a moment to experience the garden either before or after meetings. This project really came about because of a desire of a former Kansas Supreme Court Chief Justice who was looking for a place of contemplation, a serene, tranquil place to contemplate. And that's exactly what you're going to find here. I think with that, I'm going to make one more apology for. I was sure I shared the right screen. Obviously, I did not. But see if anybody has any questions.
Brendan, Greg Allen. We've visited a number of Japanese gardens over the years that were just beautiful, very serene spaces, and just, meticulously cared for. And they are extremely maintenance intensive. And what is the plan for the maintenance and, development of the garden over the years? It's going to probably take a lot of pretty skilled staff to really keep that thing looking good. What's your plan on that?
Great question, Greg. Everything that Greg just said is true. So here's our story. This garden in itself has kind of been one of those unique developments, if you will. We had got to a point in the design process where it was time to bring on a true Japanese garden master. And we put out, actually the general contractor put out a RFQ to find that person. And the person we found, his name is Koji Morimoto. He actually lives in the Kansas City area, but he is a true Japanese garden master. He's from Japan, studied in Japan, brought that craft here to North America. One of the things that I had no idea about is that a Japanese garden master is also a master carpenter. So there are all of these different skills and trades that go into what make a Japanese garden. And what we started actually with and this was a couple of years ago, we sent our horticulturist, Koji, and the superintendent all on a field trip to the Portland Japanese garden, and allowed them to kind of get to know each other there. And since that time, over the past couple of years, what Koji has done is he has met and started teaching different groups of people the different aspects of maintaining a Japanese garden. Shingles Lawn and Landscape, it used to be right down the street from the zoo. They've since moved, but he's worked with their landscapers on teaching the Japanese tradition. KBS, the general contractor, he's worked with their craftsmen on learning that traditional style of Japanese carpentry. And he's worked with our staff and our volunteers here on this is what it will take to maintain the garden. So that skill set that he has been so willing to teach people and just kind of pass that along. He's been extremely generous with his knowledge. A bunch of different people in our community have learned new things. Some of the craftsmen that are working on the project have told me that they haven't shared that with their wives because, they'll be expected to do it at home. But it's going to be a process that we'll use our staff, our trained volunteers, and at the same time, Koji's just about an hour away. From his perspective, he recognizes that this is the project that will define his career. And as such, he's poured every ounce of effort into it. One other quick follow-up to Greg's question. I asked Koji one time how long it would take this garden to mature. And his answer was 70 years. Mm-hmm. So chances are I'm not going to see it when it reaches maturity. But to give you an example, there will be a different view. It will look different. It will continue to evolve for the next 70 years.
Right. Exactly. That's the nature of a good garden. They do change.
We had another question. Where will the koi come from?
So the koi, some of them are going to come from the Sedgwick County Zoo. Some are going to come from different water garden societies throughout Kansas. And it may not be until, we're not sure when we're going to add the koi. Obviously, we're going to open, we think, August 7th. I'm not sure just yet how we're going to get that big pond full. And but once there's water in it, we've got to make sure that we can get the water appropriately conditioned for the fish that will live there. I want to say it's about 300,000 gallons, and it will recirculate and be filtered. But we might have to do some work with water before we can actually add the fish.
Okay. Another question was, will there be a charge to enter the garden?
The garden itself is part of the zoo experience. So when you buy your ticket to the zoo, or if you're a Friends of the Zoo member, you will enter the zoo. You will kind of head south on what today is a service road, but when this garden opens, it will be a visitor path. And you will enter the garden at its highest point of elevation. In a Japanese garden, it is typically tradition that the higher elevation is the more sacred part of the garden. So what you'll see is the paths are a little narrower. The experiences are a little slower to reveal themselves. And then when you get down to the lower part of the garden, it's all wide and open. But it's all part of the zoo package. There is no additional cost unless you want to rent that building for an event. And depending on the scale of the event, we can still allow people to come into the upper portion of the garden, but then reserve the lower portion for a private event.
Another question is, koi are loved by some Kansas waterfowl. Any idea of how to protect them?
We've thought about, well, yeah. So funny Kay McFarland story. She had an idea on how to protect koi. And she shared it with us one day that she had a water garden at her home. She had goldfish in it, not koi. But there was a heron who was coming by and eating her fish. So she got a Roman candle and waited for that heron to fly in, and then the fireworks went off. But we most likely will not do that. One of the things that we're considering is having a pair of swans that are also on that same pool of water. Suddenly, though, we're in this place where we have to think a little bit more carefully about the plants, and we're not sure what the swans might do to some of the landscape. But some of the things that we typically use are motion activated devices that, little windmills, things that can make it just uncomfortable for something like a heron to come in and fish in our pond.
The next two questions I'm going to combine because they're related. One is, where will the Rotarians enter for the meetings? And then what accommodations are being made for our members with disabilities to enter?
Great questions. And Stan, if you want to answer this separately, feel free. There is a gate that comes into the Japanese garden that can be used by people that are having events there, right off the zoo parking lot. So you'll come into the zoo parking lot, there'll be Rotary greeters outside that gate. If you're there for Rotary, you just go straight into the garden, into the event venue. If a person needs accommodations to get in, we can do that one of a couple different ways. One is there's a number of handicap accessible parking spots there in the front of the zoo. We may learn that it's just easier if somebody's in like a wheelchair for them to come straight in through the catering kitchen, which is right off Zoo Parkway. The short answer is there's multiple ways for people to get in. I think we might have to go through one or two meetings to figure out what that best way is. And even if we need to reserve a certain number of spots before the zoo opens that morning to make sure that there's appropriate parking for those that need it.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Hey, Johnny, can you hear me? Terry Wages.
Yes.
I got in late, so I didn't hear if they wouldn't mind repeating to everybody. How is the food being accommodated at the event center where we'll be meeting for lunch?
Stan, do you want to answer that one?
I'll field that one. The event center, event venue has 6 approved caterers, several of which you would recognize. I can't remember the whole list, but for instance, Iron Rail, Pennant, Hy-Vee. There's at least there's a barbecue place. We have, and Russ Cobb really did this, reached out to all 6 of them, and they all offer something that would be within our budget. And so the plan right now is to just rotate through those 6 caterers and try them all out. So one a week, and caterer B will have the next week. And we'll do that for a period of time. We may at some point in time decide, we're going to not use a particular caterer, but all 6 of them will be available to us, and they'll bring the food to the event venue.
Let me interrupt or add on to this statement is that when we begin to meet in July, we'll need to make sure we are in compliance with all of the COVID-19 requirements, and that could easily include being 6 feet apart, wearing a mask, and so as we initiate our new home, we will also need to be very flexible and open to how we proceed until things get more stabilized. Did you want to say anything else about that, Stan?
Well, I would anticipate we will probably not have buffets for at least some period of time. So it's not the ideal situation. We'll probably be having some box lunches, but hopefully good quality ones. And for instance, we'll set up probably more tables than are really needed, and we may limit the number of people at the table to 4 or 6, for instance, to keep that spacing. But those are the things we're anticipating.
We will also be asking members to reserve in advance so that we will know how many meals to order. So we're all, we'll be on a new adventure together in our new home as we proceed. Any other questions?
How are you going to handle guests initially during this COVID-19 period?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by guests, handling them.
Well, are you going to allow guests during this period just as normal?
Sure.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yep.
And we encourage it.
Yes, with not having a permanent home, our numbers are down. I believe that I was told this morning that our membership is at 155. So that's down by almost 25 from the beginning of the year. And you will be hearing more over the next several weeks of what our club completed over this past year and where we want to go forward in the next year. And one of them is to really be recruiting more diverse members in our club. So, is there anything else?
Diverse members, I assume that means specific animals.
And we expect you to recruit them, Terry.
Hi, Johnny. I have one question. Hello.
Okay.
It's Rehan. Well, I came late, so are we going to have physical meetings soon? And members, is that mandatory to wear mask at the meeting or what?
We will, our goal is to start having face-to-face meetings on July 9th.
Okay.
That will depend upon the county requirements and how many people can gather at that time. And we will make sure that we are in compliance with all of their requirements. If that includes wearing masks, we will ask our members to wear masks.
Okay. Okay, you're going to send us the requirement. Thank you. All right.
Hey, Joni, I have a question.
Okay.
Is there any possibility that you'll live stream some of the meetings early on?
We are hoping and anticipating that all of our meetings in the future will be live streamed. Marie is chairing a committee with that, and I believe Vince Fry is on that, and so very often, yeah. Dave Heineman and Val Vandersloot are on that, so they're very optimistic about us being able to have the streaming. And we also plan on continuing to have it on our Facebook for people to, if they're not able to participate at that time, to watch it. Okay, so with that, I want to thank you all for bearing with us over these past 4 years. We are very excited. There's been a lot of work from a lot of different people over those 4 years, trying to find a place that would accommodate us. We are thrilled that we will be a part of the K. McFarland Japanese Garden and Event Center. We will be welcome there. They will proudly have us provide Rotary Meets Here sign, which we had been working for, and look forward to an ongoing, fun, productive relationship with Brendan and the zoo. And we anticipate having some community service projects to help support the zoo with that. So with that, next week we will continue to learn more about our club, and we will be awarding 2 honorees with the Francine Hine scholarships. Now, some of our new members are probably not familiar with Francine Hines, so Hurst Kaufman will be presenting a program on Francine Hines and why we give scholarships in her name. Also, throughout the remainder of the year, we will be sharing with you what's been going on in the background during the last 12 months, and especially these last 3 months when we have been safe at home. And so with that, I will ask us all to say the 4-way test +2. of the things we think, say, and do? Is it
Is it true?
Is it fair to all
Concern, goodwill, better friendships. Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Will it be fun?
And is it kind?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for sharing our good news.
Thanks, Brendan.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.